and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming along and supporting Susie in her first book. So this is really just a Q&A. I wanted to ask her a bit more about why she wrote the book, why it was set the way it was set, the characters, but you know, feel free if you want to ask some questions. I'll give you opportunity at the end because it's really nice to know that a lot of you have already read the book. And if the mic plays up or anything, just let me know, because I know sometimes it can pop and I'm already hearing it reverberate a little bit, but hopefully it'll be all good as we get into it. So, Susie, I know a little bit about the background to this book because 5 years ago, I encouraged Susie to go on you were keen to do it as well. It was a one-day course at ECU about writing a novel and a book, and I met Susie on this course. She wanted to do the course, and the seed of the idea for this book was back then, wasn't it? So 5 years ago.
No, actually it was before then.
Okay, so to fill us in, come on, give me some background to how this seed of a book became an idea and moved forward.
So before I left the UK, when I was working in Scotland as a teacher, I had all these kids that I worked with who had full of head lice and from horrendous backgrounds and things like that. And one day I said, I'm going to write a story about these kids just to acknowledge that the hardship that they went through. So that was always been my plan, so probably about 10, maybe even more years ago. And then it wasn't until we came to Australia and we were touring around Australia, and we had, I wasn't working for 9 months or whatever, I had an opportunity to actually start writing it. So that's when I actually got all my ideas down onto my iPad and started typing away.
So you're actually a teacher by profession, so what prompts someone to think, I'm actually going to take time out from teaching to write this book? And also it takes a lot of time. I don't think people quite realise the amount of time that goes into something like this.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I actually did it for the kids, so that's what prompted me to do it. And I think also I'd done a course and worked with somebody who'd worked with the boys from the Jamie Bulger case. Remember that back in the UK? So it was a horrendous case where 2 young boys, it's a bit sad, but killed a toddler basically. And I worked with a lady who helped turn one of the boys' legs around, and she basically said, like, behind every behaviour there's a reason, and that's the tagline for the book, behind every behaviour there's a reason. So every time I worked with a child like that, since being on that course, I was like, okay, this child is swearing at me, this child is calling me whatever, but I also knew that then there was a reason for his behaviour or her behaviour, and I wanted to share that through the book and show that in every character in the book, they all have certain behaviours and things like that, and I wanted to share how, even though their behaviours weren't particularly nice all the time, it was because of whatever was going on in the background.
So your book is called Beneath the Radar. Is that explaining the reason with your background? And also, how do you decide on the characters and the plot line and things like that? How did that come to you? Was it like instant, or did you have to give a lot of time and thought to it? And what was the hardest parts of the book?
I think I went to another writing book workshop in Queensland on a tour around Australia, and they had said just dump it. So that was their way of doing it, is just get the story out and dump it. So basically it had all the characters in my head, and the hardest part of the book was probably the editing part that took 10 years.
But I've heard the beginning and the end is always the hardest. So did you start with the beginning, or you said you got your characters and then where do you go from there? The actual plot of the book?
Oh, the actual plot, okay. No, I think I started with the end. So I knew how it was going to end, I knew how it was going to begin, and then I filled in the middle. Okay. So that's how I did it, yeah.
Okay, and what's that writing process or the thought process for you? How did you get those ideas?
I don't know. I don't know, it just came. It was as easy as reading a book as it was writing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it's very much like that.
Okay. And of course it's been more than 8 years since you worked in a school in Scotland, but you wanted to stick to that and be loyal to your Scottish roots. Yeah. Did you think that might not alienate people reading the book because you were talking about a land that you were 8 years ago that's obviously not familiar to many Australians, or did you think that was the only way you could convey some of the characters deeply with the language?
think because the idea had started in Scotland, it was the only way I was going to do it. It was, and I think I set it in the town that I actually worked in, so every street that I went down it. Every place I went into, every hill I went up to, I went up in my head because I'd already physically done it. So, that was very much part of the book, was definitely to have it set in Scotland. I couldn't have done it any other way. I don't think my Australian accent's that good yet.
And it is really gritty because your two characters, your children characters, Lucy and Connor, I mean, not so much Lucy. Well, let's talk about Lucy because she's actually mute, she hasn't spoken for 2 years. I'm not going to give any plot spoilers away, but Lucy is one of the main characters in the book. She hasn't spoken for 2 years and she's got a very close relationship with her brother. But was that difficult to write a character that doesn't speak? Because it sort of adds another dimension. You have to be very careful about the way you write it.
I think it was at times I kind of questioned myself, did I write that okay and things like that? And I know Helen had kind of prompted me. Helen's the publisher and editor, and there's a few different parts that Helen helped out with just to explain it better. I think sometimes in my early editions it was a bit more confusing, to make it clear and to show that she was not talking. It was tricky at some parts, but I had some expert help that helped me along.
Why was it a must for you to include her as someone that hadn't spoken for 2 years?
I think because I've actually come along or met and worked with a few kids that have been like that as a result of trauma, so it was just to, I suppose, show that kids suffer like that, basically.
And they swear like that at that age? Because it's like primary school.
Yeah, they swear like that, Come to any school that in Australia, in Scotland, in the classroom to your face, to the principal, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. But it's not their fault though, is it? It's as a result of the background that they've come from type thing, so.
And that's the title of the book is Beneath the Radar, and the actual mum character, she's sort of kept a little bit in the distance, so we're always wondering things about what mum comes in and out of the plot line, but not in great detail. Was that to create suspense, or what was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I think it was, and just to show again that she's obviously got issues going on and things like that. So, and I wanted to use her more at the end to tell her story and for her to show what was going on with her type thing, and just try and build some empathy, because I know I've talked to many teachers, and myself being a teacher, I think when you get kids like that in your class, I think it's quite easy to quickly point fingers at the parents, isn't it? But I think you have to realise sometimes they've got a whole lot of stuff going on as well, that you have to be gentle and kind with them as well, and I don't think we're always like that. I think we're quick to judge, quick to point.
And that sort of showed in the book, didn't it, with some of the teachers, didn't it, with the head lice and things like that, issues, the very short shrift, there was no compassion, but there was one teacher that was compassionate. Yeah. Are you the teacher that was compassionate?
Of course. No, I don't know. I think there's been lots of teachers like that and that I've met. I mean, there's many teachers that are very, very compassionate. And I think every teacher wants to be, and I think even teachers who are strict or come across as maybe not as compassionate, they've got their reasons for doing that as well. So, and there's no right way or wrong way of doing anything, isn't there? It's just a different way of doing things.
So what was your favourite part of the book? The book, was it the favourite part to write as well?
I really enjoyed writing the mum part. I really got caught up in doing that.
That was at the end?
Yeah, it was.
That was a very, very long paragraph, or not paragraph, but long chapter, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think for me, just being able to show that mother's love in a different type of way. I mean, it didn't always, I don't want to spoil it, but it doesn't seem like that at some points, but I think it's the only way the mother could show how much she loved for her kids through the things that she did.
Okay. Now I'm going to talk about some of the words that you use. So I've made a note of some of them here. So my favourite line, I've just asked you about your favourite part of the book. Now my favourite line, he was balmy and hairy and had eyebrows that warranted a personal hairstylist each. How did that sort of thing come to you?
That was my old maths teacher. A bit like that.
Yeah, okay. Now, other words that I've never come across before, and maybe this is where the editor sort of said, oh, I don't know if you should use those words. So Connor sniffed his oaksters, and when Helen went on a date, she was asked by a friend if she had a good night's winch. Now, I don't know, maybe I'm not Australian or Scottish enough, I've never heard of these words. So why did you use those words, and was it deliberate, and why? Yeah.
Because that's what you call your underarms in Scotland, your oaksters. And a winch is a kiss, so after a good night you always want to know with your friend or whatever, you got a good winch.
But did you not think other people might not know, or did you think they'd be like me, they'd sort of put it together and think, well, that's a bit different, quirky?
I think it's just what we use, isn't it? I don't think it's anything other than what we use, so yeah, it was just to keep it in line with what we use in Scotland.
Okay. So the children in the character, Lucy and Connor, they're obviously running away from something, but you chose not to explore it in much detail.
That's the second book.
Okay. Spits and starts, or?
Yeah, very much so. So having two lovely kids and then working full time, yeah, you're just trying to fit it in whenever you can. So I had to get up early in the morning and type for an hour, then stop and then whatever. So it's just trying to fit it in. It's not unfortunately I don't get paid to do it, so just when I can I had to do it.
So do you do like a bulk dump and then you go through it again and you edit it in finer detail?
Yeah.
And do you like go away from it for a couple of weeks or a month and then come back and make those edits? Or is it like the next day?
Pretty much. Sometimes 6 months, just depends what was going on at that time or whatever. So that's why it's taken 10 years.
About the end of the book, and you've just said there is going to be a second book, but the ending just was not what I expected. So I was like a bit, what? Why did you think for you that was the right ending?
It was to show how much the mother loved her kids. That's the only reason.
Okay. And you said you started the book, or that was how the idea of the
Yeah.
book came about.
Yeah.
So you sort of thought about that long chapter way in advance.
Yeah, with that ending, yeah.
Okay, so tell us now, you've told us a little bit that there is going to be another book, but how much can you give away at this stage?
So it is about the dad, and this book was about how there's a reason for every behaviour, and this book's looking at benefits and drawbacks of the decisions that we make and how there's no right or wrong decision that we ever make in life. So that's the kind of theme of this book, the second book.
So obviously Lucy and Connor and Mum, or not. I don't want to give too many spoilers away.
Yeah.
But there's obviously a different plot, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, there is. So it's going to be more about his life and how he's ended up to become the way he became, basically.
Okay. And you are obviously passionate about writing, so half of me thinks, why don't you give up your teaching job and do something in writing? But is that another love of yours as well, teaching?
Yeah, I do love teaching, and I think it's as hard as it can be at times. I do love it, and I do love meeting all the different kids that I meet. So my teaching.
You said in the foreword of your book that you credit your parents, don't you?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about growing up and having their influence in the household for writing and reading.
Yeah, well, so they've always read, and my mum used to be a librarian, and I can't remember, is it the Mitchell Library in Glasgow? Yeah, the main library in Glasgow. She used to be a librarian there, so I've always been surrounded by books, and they've always read. So yeah, so they were definitely how I get into books, and that's how I spent a lot of my childhood reading. So, and as I said, writing the book was as enjoyable as it was as reading a book for me.
What's the name of the second book?
The name of the second book. I think it's going to be. I need to think of a good Scottish name. It might be Johnny, Benefits and Drawbacks. So it's going to be the character's name and then Benefits and Drawbacks.
Susie,
Yeah.
what sort of books had you like to read prior to writing? Biographies?
Oh no, probably mostly novels of any type. Yes, I would never have narrowed myself down to one particular type, but any type. I enjoy reading books about Scotland now.
Yeah.
Are you the first in your sort of immediate generations to be published?
The first to be published, but apparently my granny used to write, but I don't know, I don't think she'd ever been published.
Do you have a dedicated space to writing at home?
I have now got an office, but previously I was writing on my iPad and then just sitting in the back of the camper van and just typing whenever I could. But I couldn't edit it very well on an iPad. It wasn't the best thing to use, but it was what I had. So yeah, I use my office really. So actually, I just started taking some notes just in a journal at the moment. But yeah, so in the house somewhere. Yeah.
Do you find you perform better if there's quiet, like you've also got a couple of kids? Do you need quiet to make the thinking process work better, or can you write anywhere if you're in the zone?
If I'm in the zone, then I can just write. I can just kind of block it out and just get into it. Yeah.
And what about from an editing point of view? How did that book, because you edited it, understand? How was that easy?
Yeah. I read and picked up punctuation marks. That was about it. It was pretty much a polished product when it came.
And did you enjoy the read yourself?
I loved it. I want to say to Susie, my daughter is my proofreader. She's a school teacher.
Yeah.
And she says, thank you for all the things that the teachers did with the children, because she now puts that into her class and has had a really good effect with the students on some of those techniques. So she said to thank you for that.
Thank you for reading it.
Just things to say. I love the book. Both my parents are from Greenock and Glasgow, so near each other. But I've been doing genealogy as well, so I've been kind of immersed in historical Glasgow. So when I read the book, it was very easy to make it not modern day. In my head, it wasn't. It was like the 1950s or 1940s. I loved coming across words that I remember as a child, which I'd forgotten about, like jobbies. A jobby in a log. I was like, oh my God, yes, we call them jobbies as well.
And what about the picture on the book? How did this come about?
So the picture, the scene in the background is actually of where it's set in Ardrossan, and that's where the school that I worked in for 10 years was. And then obviously that's the two characters that Helen helped me find and put in front of it. So, and this is Arran in the background, a little island, and it's up a hill called the Cannon Hill.
Okay, so that's actually a place.
Yeah, that's right.
Because that does sort of portray the sort of grittiness of where it's at.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to your next one. Any more questions? It was really nice.
All right. So this is Connor. So this is one of the main characters. After what seemed like an eternity, the home bell went. Connor dragged his feet across the concrete of the playground, scuffing his battered trainers, his teacher's voice still ringing in his ears.
Hell, we should have got that.
It's your mic.
Yeah.
That's not right.
Bitch telling him to make sure his mother checks his head before he returns to school tomorrow. Fat chance of that happening. Kids ran past him, shouting at each other as they ran free from school for another day, racing to meet their parents at the front gate. Connor gazed up at the old Victorian building with its huge arched windows. He bent down and picked up a stone and threw it into the air, considering the fun he might have later with a much bigger stone. He was snapped out of his reverie as a younger kid bolted into him from behind, sending him flying. Connor turned and shot the wee one a look that sent him fleeing in the opposite direction, muttering an apology as he went. Scowling, he made his way up to the school gate and saw Lucy standing, waiting for him. What the hell did she have to smile about, he thought. He grunted at her as he neared. She scurried up to him and smiled, and then tried to keep up with him as they made their way home. See you tomorrow, Lucy, a wee girl shouted. He guessed she must have been in Lucy's class. Lucy looked up and waved at the girl. That's not like you to have a pal. You're not going to speak to her. Can't get your tongue again, he chided. Lucy put her head down and Connor caught her smiling. Her happiness made him feel even more pissed off. How can she have a pal when she can't even talk? He'd had a shite day, moping around by himself as everyone else ran away with her best buds. They wandered down the tenement-lined street, eyes down to ensure their feet didn't become splattered with new shades of brown from the dog shit that was smeared on every other paper. The warmth of the sun raised a glow from within their bones. It shone down victoriously from the rare blue skies. Since early light, it had fought persistently with the clouds and now claimed its rightful position above. Connor turned off the street and made his way along a bottle-strewn alley, reminders of the youngsters that frequented the area with her carryouts. The alley led to a playground at the top of the hill. Lucy faithfully followed a big brother, skipping every so often to keep up with his longer strides. Beyond the tops of the cruddy houses that littered the forgotten seaside town with its tormented inhabitants, the view of the sea was spectacular. The sunshine had transformed it into a magical scene of glittering waves that sparkled and danced. Yachts dotted the view as he looked out towards the nearby island. A glance to the south, however, revealed a dirty oil tanker bobbing up and down on the gentle waves like a giant jobby, floating in a pristine toilet bowl. Oblivious to this dichotomy, Connor made a run for the seesaw and energetically thumped up and down, the empty side banging with force off the cushioned tarmac below. Lucy perched herself onto a swing and gently began pushing herself forwards and backwards, dragging her feet through the mud left behind from a forgotten puddle. They whiled their time away doing their own thing, no words required, both all too well aware that there was not much to go home to. It wasn't like the mum would be looking for them, she probably wasn't even out of bed yet. Their peace was broken by screeches and laughter travelling up the hill. Bit by bit they saw the heads, then bodies, then legs of a group of kids making their way towards them. Connor recognised some of them from school. He turned his head back to them and continued looking out to sea, his legs dangling over the side of the monkey bars. Lucy was still in the swing, and once she had seen what the noise was, had dropped her head back down. The group of 2 boys and 2 girls confidently strolled over to the playground. This was their patch. "Look what we've got here, Gary. Itchy and Scratchy, and they're at our park." "I don't remember you saying they could come to our park, Tony," Gary chimed in. "Look, Scratchy is trying to hide behind our nitty here," shrieked Jenny. The gang gave a snort of laughter, waiting to see what their ringleader was going to initiate. This lovely drawing was done by fabulous Alicia here, so she never put her name on it, unfortunately, but